Hi, welcome back. This week I'd like you to read an essay by Jennifer Goldbeck. Jennifer is a computer scientist at the University of Maryland, and she's written several books about social media, including Analyzing the Social Web, Computing with Social Trust. She's also written several articles for online magazines like Slate.com. Now, I think you could also call her a social activist. She has a pretty strong mission to develop new methods for protecting the personal data of social media users. In her essay, Jennifer talks about a company that created an app called Shopkick. Now, if you're not familiar with iBeacons, this is kind of an indoor GPS system where retail stores can place a device on a wall that will track your smartphone as soon as you walk in the front door. This gives them the opportunity to show you discounts and special offers depending on where you are at in the store. For example, if you were in the TV department of a retail store, the app would not only know that you were located in that section of the store, but it would also know which products you were standing in front of. That would allow the app to show you certain discounts or coupons for a particular product. iBeacons can also be used to facilitate wireless payments inside these stores where you shop. iBeacons can also be used in your home. For example, as you're approaching the front door with your iPhone in your hand, it might trigger lights to come on or to unlock the doors or to open the garage. So what's the problem with iBeacons and this kind of new technology? Well, Jennifer Goldbeck's argument is that the convenience might be nice for consumers, but the companies that provide this kind of technology aren't doing enough to protect our privacy. So give the essay a read and let me know what you think. I've also included a link to a video where she also talks about some of the new technology and how it's impacting social media. This week I'd like to continue with our work on drafting an essay, and you'll find more about this in Chapter 4 of your textbook. Now, as you know, I've broken this project into 3 parts. We started out with part 1, where I had you create a topic, a thesis sentence or a thesis statement, and then come up with some subpoints or some topic sentences that you might be able to use to develop paragraphs. In part 2, I had you take those topic sentences and actually write paragraphs. Now, in part 3, we're going to work on creating a title, an introduction, and a conclusion. Now here's what you have now. You've got the 4 paragraphs that you worked on from last week. What we're going to be doing this week is adding a title, an introduction, and a conclusion. Now it might seem logical to start with creating a title for your essay, but my personal preference is to save that for last. I'm usually able to come up with better ideas for a title after I've had some time to work on the essay. So let's start with the introduction. So what is an introduction? Well, if you look the term up in a dictionary, you'll see that it says, obviously, the action of introducing something. But in terms of an essay, the real purpose of an introduction is to, 1, introduce your topic, 2, include your thesis sentence, and that should be in the paragraph towards the end, and 3, intrigue a reader to continue reading. Now, steps 1 and 2 are the easy part. Introducing your topic and including your thesis is a fairly easy task, but number 3, intriguing a reader to continue reading, might be a little more of a challenge. So I want to talk a little bit more about that, how to intrigue a reader. Now, good writers have learned to use some different types of introductions to really intrigue the reader to read more. I'm going to give you some examples. Here's an example of an introduction called a general statement. I'm going to use the essay that you read earlier in the semester by Howard White. And here's his introduction where he uses a general statement. I work at a company where there are about a gazillion employees. I can't say that I know them all by name, but I know my fair share of them. I think that most all of them know me. I'd say that's the reason I've been able to go wherever it is I've made it in this world. It's all based on one simple principle. I believe that every single person deserves to be acknowledged, however small or simple the greeting. So that's his introduction. As you can see, he has placed his thesis at the end of the introduction. Here's another example. Now this kind of introduction is where you tell a story. And I'm going to use the example that you read earlier by Anna Lappe. In her introduction, she says, on February 10, 2012, Ronald McDonald held court in a packed elementary school auditorium. Ronald was visiting the Lexington, Kentucky elementary school as part of his sweep of that state. The visits are meant to teach the value of leadership and community involvement, says Ronald, and kick off fundraising drives for Ronald McDonald houses. Today, junk food marketing happens in so many places and in so many ways that it's often behind parents' backs and beyond our control. Now that was her introduction. It's a nice example of telling a story to get the reader started in the essay. And as you'll notice, her thesis is located toward the end of the introduction. Here's another example. This type of introduction uses a quote. And I'm going to again use the Anna LaPaix example. As you can see in the middle, she's placed a quote, the value of leadership and community involvement. Another example is a type of introduction where you make a compelling argument to the reader why that person should read your essay. So let's look at this example from Sherry Turkle. Over the past 15 years, I've studied technologies of mobile connection and talked to hundreds of people of all ages and circumstances about their plugged-in lives. I've learned that the little devices most of us carry around are so powerful that they change not only what we do, but also who we are. We've become accustomed to a new way of being alone together. Technology-enabled, we are able to be with one another and also elsewhere, connected to wherever we want to be. Now that was Sherry Turkle's introduction, and it's a very good example of compelling to the reader why he or she should read your essay. And if you notice, Sherry's put her thesis somewhere in the middle of the introduction, a little bit closer to the end. Another type of introduction poses a question to the reader. And I'm going to use the example from Sagata Mitra's essay that I had you read a little earlier in the semester. Would a person with a good handwriting, spelling, and grammar and instant recall of multiplication tables be considered a better candidate for a job than, say, one who knows how to configure a peer-to-peer network of devices, set up an organization-wide Google Calendar, and find out where the most reliable sources of venture capital are? I wonder. It's a pretty long sentence, but it is in fact a question, and I think it's a pretty effective introduction to his entire essay. So, with an introduction, where do we start? What I'd like you to do is go back to part 2 where you've written the 4 paragraphs and kind of pull those out and put them together on one page. I'd also like you to read your paragraphs a few times, get familiar with your own writing, and then write another paragraph. In your paragraph, talk about what you've written. Paraphrase yourself and use synonyms just to break up the pattern. Remember that you can always go to thesaurus.com to come up with different variations of words that you can put in your introduction. And don't forget to work in your thesis. After you've written your introduction paragraph, go ahead and put it together with your other paragraphs just to see how they all fit together. Now it's time to work on a conclusion. So what is a conclusion? Well, in the same way that good writers have learned to use different types of introductions, good writers have also learned to use different types of conclusions to work really well with an essay. For example, one way to conclude your essay is to restate your thesis. Be sure to use new words, different synonyms that maybe you found at thesaurus.com. Another way to conclude your essay is to have a call to action. That's when you make a recommendation or a judgment, or you ask your reader to do something. Another way to conclude your essay is called framing. That's where you simply refer to something in the introduction of your essay. So let's take a look at a few examples. In the Anna LaPaix essay, she concludes her essay by restating the thesis. Let's take a look first at her thesis. Today, junk food marketing happens in so many places and in so many ways that it's often behind parents' backs and beyond our control. Now let's take a look at her conclusion. You can turn off the TV and your kids will still be exposed to junk food marketing. For kids today, marketing is ubiquitous, and McDonald's has been front and center in making it so. Here's an example of how to conclude your essay with a call to action. I'm going to use the Sagata Mitra example. First, let's take a look at his thesis, and this is an abbreviated version. Now let's take a look at his conclusion. We don't need to improve schools. We need to reinvent them for our times, our requirements, and our future. We need people who can think divergently across outdated disciplines, connecting ideas across the entire mass of humanity. We need people who can think like children. As you can see, he's making a call to action to his readers. Here's an example where you can conclude your essay by framing. What you do here is you refer in your conclusion to something you said earlier in the introduction. And I'm going to use the Howard White essay as an example. First, let's take a look at his introduction. I work at a company where there are about a gazillion employees. I can't say that I know them all by name, but I know my fair share of them. Now, if we look at his conclusion, you can see that he's referring to some of the things he already said in his introduction. I've become vice president, but that hasn't changed the way I approach people. I still follow my mother's advice. I speak to everyone I see, no matter where I am. Now, once you have a paragraph written for your conclusion, go ahead and put it together with your other paragraphs just to see how it looks. Now let's talk a little bit about a title. Okay, what makes a good title? Well, for the most part, it's going to take a lot of your own good judgment and creativity to come up with a really nice title. But there are a few basic rules you can follow. 1, try to keep your title short. It'd be easier to read and it'd be more interesting to your readers. 2, obviously make sure that your title reflects your thesis and the topic of your essay. 3, try to be a little creative. If you're going to go to the trouble to write a title, spend a little time to come up with something that might be intriguing. Let's look at a few examples. In the Howard White essay, if you recall, his thesis was, I believe that every single person deserves to be acknowledged, however small or simple the greeting. Now let's see what kind of title he used for that. The Power of Hello. Very nice title. It's short. Obviously, it's related to the topic and the thesis of his essay, and I think it has kind of an interesting and creative twist. Here's an example from the Sherry Turkle essay. Her thesis was, we've become accustomed to a new way of being alone together. Now let's see what kind of a title she came up with. The Flight from Conversation. Again, it's short. Obviously, it's related to her thesis and her topic, and I think it has kind of an interesting twist to it. Here's an example from the Anna LaPay essay. In her thesis, today, junk food marketing happens in so many places and in so many ways that it's often behind parents' backs and beyond our control. Pretty interesting title that she came up with. It's short, not loving it. Moms and McDonald's don't mix. It's interesting because she's doing a play on the McDonald's slogan, loving it. And obviously, it's related to her topic and her thesis. Here's another example from Leela Ajarlu. We need designs that take into consideration the entire life of a product, including the extraction of its raw materials, its daily use, and its ultimate demise. Now, one thing I like about Ajarlu's title is that often when you're writing about a scientific topic, it can be difficult to come up with an interesting title. But I think she does a really nice job here. Paper or plastic. It's very short. It's related to her topic and her thesis, and I think it has a really creative spin. So if you have any questions about Part 3, be sure and let me know. You can contact me through Angel or at my email address shown here. Have a good week, and I'll see you next time.